Hello, guys, and we're back again explaining Game Manual 2 Part 2, starting from 4.4. I'm Dhruv,
And I'm Kush.
and today we're going to be starting with 4.4, the gameplay, and more game specific rules and other terms related to the center stage season. So, over to Kush.
So today we'll be going through 4.4, 4.5, 4.6, and 4.7. All these subsections are based on the center stage competition mainly and are not general rules which apply to each and every year of FTC. So without any further ado, let's start. Okay, so 4.4 gameplay. So basically, this is the whole flowchart of how the game match will go. Okay, and in short, the whole game contains three periods, and these three periods in total take a time of 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So to start, there's a 30-second autonomous driver period, then there's a 2-minute driver control period, and in the last 30 seconds of the driver control period, there's the end game period. And additionally, there's also a 8-second transition between the autonomous period and the driver control period. Let's start with 4.4.1 pre-match. So pre-match is basically what all will be set up into the arena. Let's start with pixel placement. So first, on the field, there will be 6 stacks of 5 white pixels. So 6 stacks of 5 white pixels means there will be 3 stacks for each alliance, and this is alliance specific. So there will be 3 stacks for of 5 white pixels on the blue alliance side and 3 stacks of 5 white pixels on the red alliance side. Then there's the pixel storage. There are two pixel storage locations, one for the red alliance and one for the blue alliance. Each of the storage location will contain 3 stacks of 5 white pixels, as I mentioned, 1 stack of 5 purple pixels, 1 stack of 5 yellow pixels, and 1 stack of 5 green pixels. So this pixel storage will be outside of the main arena or the field, and when the driver control period starts, the human player can put these into the field. Then is the randomization task. So 4 white pixels on one of each spike marks. These pixels will be centered on the top of the spike marks. So what does this mean? As we stated in the previous video, this is the arena. And in this arena, on the coordinates B4, B2, E4, and E2, there'll be spike marks. And now each of these spike marks will show left, right, or center, and corresponding to a pixel or a team prop on the spike mark, the robot should place a yellow pixel on the backdrop. So now these spike marks on the places of the white pixel or the team prop will be randomized on any of the three of the lines of the spike mark, as you see. Going on to the driver team setup and where the robot will start. First is the starting location. So driver teams with the agreement of the alliance partners select their robots' starting location. So since there are of course two teams in one alliance, they will have to select which
Team.
will start near the backdrop, basically on the fourth column, and which robot will start near the audience or the second column. In this, where will the robots be placed? So for the Blue Alliance, as they have stated, the robots must be completely in the tile A2 or A4. As you can see, these are the tiles exactly adjacent to the spike marks, so it will be easier for robots to detect the team prop or the white pixel at the start of the autonomous period. One more catch to this is that the robot should be touching the playing field wall when the match starts. So this is to make sure that no robot is crossing the boundary of the tile. Then we come on to preloaded pixels. The driver team may preload exactly one yellow pixel and or one purple pixel if used. Preloaded pixels are taken from pixel storage. When loaded, the preloaded pixels must be outside all scoring areas. So basically, when you start, you can place two pixels onto the robot, one yellow pixel and one purple pixel, and additionally with this, you can also preload one drone on the robot. So now the yellow and purple pixels have multiple uses. Firstly, the purple pixel has to be placed on one of the three stripes of the spike mark. Now, if the purple pixel is placed on the tape of the spike mark which contains a white pixel or a team prop, then the team will gain extra points. The yellow pixel has to be scored on the backdrop. Then is the team prop. So drive teams intending to use their team prop must place it centered on top of the center spike mark as shown in this image. As you can see, the center spike mark is the one that is in the middle of the two parallel spike marks and is facing towards the inside. If a team prop is used, the white pixels placed into the alliance's pixel storage. Then is OP mode. Driver teams use their driver station to select an autonomous OP mode. If the driver team does not have an autonomous OP mode, steps 2 and F below can be skipped. So this is basically for the autonomous period and how your robot can have multiple modes for the autonomous period depending upon the situation. So press the driver station init button to basically start the mode. Then the autonomous timer, a 30-second timer must remain enabled. So basically when the robot is in the autonomous mode, a 30-second timer on board the robot should be on, so the robot turns off after the 30 seconds. Robot motion, robot must be motionless prior to the start of the match. This is very straightforward. Then there's driver station. Drive teams may not touch their driver station or controllers until the autonomous period has ended. Expected to start their autonomous program, if applicable, with a single touch to the driver station Android device screen. So this basically means to start the autonomous program, the drive team should try and not go to the driver station, but have a single button that they press to start the autonomous period. So that will make starting the autonomous period a little more easier. The fourth is once the referee signal the setup is complete, three things will happen. Drive teams will no longer touch their robot until the conclusion of the match. Drive teams may not touch their driver station or controllers until the autonomous period has ended. Exceptions to this include using the driver station to start their autonomous program or their program disable their robot as instructed by a referee. So basically, once the autonomous period has started, the drive teams may not go to a driver station or also touch the robot unless the referee has told them has informed them to disable the robot or stop the program. Then the scoring system will choose one of the spike marks, left, center, or right, as the target for the randomization task. Field personnel will move the randomization object to the chosen spike mark as specified in Appendix C. So basically how, as I mentioned, the team prop or the white pixel will be randomized on the three spike marks. Then next we come on to 4.4.2, which is the autonomous period. So this is the first 30 seconds in which the robot has to only respond to sensor inputs and pre-programmed commands, and it cannot be given commands by the driving team. So before the autonomous period starts, a field personnel will do a countdown, and as soon as the countdown ends, the autonomous period will begin. The drive teams may issue robot start commands with their driver station Android device to run the autonomous op mode that was selected during pre-match setup. Failure to adhere to this procedure may subject the team to a penalty as specified in the game rules in section 4.5.2, which will be briefed by Dhruv later on in this video. Drive teams are not required to start executing an OP mode during the autonomous period. So this is basically saying that once the countdown is done, the drive teams may directly start the autonomous period. Then autonomous points are scored as rest of the following achievements. Okay, so there are multiple ways you can score points in autonomous period, and here are all the ways which you can score points. First is navigation. Robots that park in the backstage for the corresponding alliance earn 5 points for each robot. So backstage basically the area just below the backdrop. Okay, it's a very big rectangular shaped area where the robots can easily park after placing the yellow pixel. So you can earn extra points. Then is the randomization task. These are two distinct tasks based on the spike mark location that was designated during randomization. A robot may only use its preloaded pixels to earn randomization task points. So basically, the robot cannot use preloaded pixels to earn normal points. It has to earn randomization task points. First is a purple pixel, as I stated first. A purple pixel placed on the robot's designated spike mark in the tile immediately adjacent to the starting position earns points depending on the randomization object used. If there's a white pixel on the spike mark and your robot manages to place a purple pixel on the spike mark, then the team earns 20 points. But if a team prop is there instead of the pixel, then the team earns 20 points. Then a yellow pixel on the backdrop in the location corresponding to a designated spike mark earns points depending on the randomization object used. So basically, as I told, left, center, and right, the spike marks will be coded as left, center, and right. And if the robot manages to score a pixel on the backdrop corresponding to where the team prop or the pixel is, then points can be earned. So basically, if the robot places the yellow pixel corresponding to the white pixel, then the team will gain 10 points. But if a team prop is used as a correspondent, then the team will earn 20 points. Then is pixels. Robots placing pixels earn points as follows. All pixels on the reassessed scoring area of the alliance's backdrop earn 5 points per pixel. Pixels in the alliance backstage earn 3 points per pixel. Pixels that are scored in the autonomous period will earn additional points at the end of the driver control period if they remain in place. Next, coming on to 4.4.3, the driver control period. So directly after the autonomous period, the teams will have a 5 to 8 second 5 to 8 second interval in which they can go to a driver stations and get ready with all their gear, and then a 3 to 1 go countdown will will commence the 120-second driver control period. So the robots are only allowed to move as soon as the word go has been shouted by the referee. Then here are the tasks with the driver control from which you can score points in the driver control period. First is pixels. Robots placing pixels each on points as follows. So like a a pixel on their on the alliance's backdrop. So if the robot places a pixel on their backdrop, then there are 3 points per pixel. And pixels in the backstage, so like the area below the backdrop, each pixel earns 1 point. Then there's the artist bonus mosaics, which are like three non-white pixels together, each mosaic on 10 points. And then there's a set bonus. So as you would know, the backdrops have 3 lines on them which are marked by tape. So if the stacked pixels do reach the tape line, so for each tape line they touch, they get 10 points. 10 points. And vertically crossing in each set line, which means like covering the whole set line vertically, then they earn 1 point as bonus. So the maximum number of set points is of course 30 because there are 3 lines. Then comes the final part of the main game, the end game. This is the 4.4.4. So the last 30 seconds of the driver control period is called the end game. Driver control period scoring can still take place during the end game. So basically, you can still, like you can still place pixels, then you can still earn set bonuses while the end game is going on. But then the end game has some other achievements too, which you can get. End game achievements other than navigating begin before the start of the end game are worth 0 points. So suppose there's one achievement in end game, drone launching. If you launch the drone before the end game has started, you will not get any points for it. So okay, here are the two here are the two separate tasks you can do in end game to earn extra points. First is robot location tasks. there are two robot location tasks. Then so like for your robot can only earn points for one of these tasks since it cannot be at two places at once. First is suspended from the rigging. So robot suspended by corresponding alliance is rigging. So basically as you can see in the image I have put up. So on the blue alliance side, as you can see, there are two riggings, and if a robot is suspended from them, basically the robot is hanging from the riggings without touching the floor mat, they will earn 20 points. And if the robot is parked in the backstage, as you can see the backstage also near the backdrop in the image, if the robot are parked in the backstage, it will earn 5 points. Then comes drone launching. So launch drones that end up parked in landing zone earn points as shown. So the launch drones must pass over the truss and or stage door for each scoring attempt to earn points. Drone launching is scored at rest. So what does this mean? First rule that whenever you launch the drone, it should go over the truss or the middle door, as you can see in the image again. The the drone has to go over these trusses and over the field wall and land into one of the three landing zones. So there are three landing zones, landing zone 1, 2, and 3. This was also a more brief description about these was given in the last video. So do check that out after this video if you have any confusions. So in the closer, basically the closer the landing zone, the more points you earn. So there's the 30 points in landing zone 1, 20 in landing zone 2, and 10 points in landing zone 3. Then we come to post match. This is 4.4.5. So by the conclusion of the stop match round, drive teams must press the stop button on their driver stations. Field personnel will finalize the score. Referees will signal for drive teams to enter the playing field and retrieve their robots and drones. Drive teams should return any tournament provided game elements that are possessed by the robots to the playing field. The playing field reset crew will set up the playing field for the next match. So this is not that important, but basically that time that you have to wait for the referee's call before picking up your robot or drone and etc. If you don't wait for referee's call and just rush in there, you might face a penalty. Talking about penalties, let's move forward to 4.4.6 penalties. So this is a very small description of how the penalty score will be added. Dhruv will be going over the intricacies of penalties right after this. So penalties. Penalty points are added to the non-offending alliance score at the end of the match. Minor penalties give the non-offending alliance 10 points per occurrence. Major penalties give the non-offending alliance 30 points per occurrence. Warnings have no effect on an alliance score. So this is very simple that when you get there are two types of penalties. First of all, minor and major. If you get a minor penalty, then the opposing alliance will gain 10 points after the match. But if you have a major penalty, then the opposing alliance will gain 30 points after the match. Then we come to the flowchart of the match play. So this is a very useful tool in the game manual too. And if you would like, you should take a screenshot of this right here and keep it saved, because this will be what you will need to look at every day in order to know the flow of the match and how the whole competition will go. So I'll just give a brief about this. These are all the sections as I just spoke about before, but these are in a very simpler manner. So of course, first is the pre-match setup where the teams will set the robot up and press the init button for the autonomous period. Then there'll be a 3, 2, 1 go and the autonomous period starts. The robots will operate and it will end with a buzzer. Then there'll be a 8-second transition. Okay, so in this transition, you can prepare for driver control period, select driver control op mode, push the init button, and 3, 2, 1 go. You go on to a driver control period. Then you score points in this, and this also again ends with a buzzer. You have to push the stop button on the driver station. There's the post match. Then in the post match, you have to wait for the signal and then power off your robots and exit the playing field. Now we come on to 4.5. 4.5 is basically all the rules and penalties and etc. And we have Dhruv here to sum it up for you, very nicely. So on to you, Dhruv.
All right, so there's three major categories of rules. There's safety rules denoted by an S hashtag. There's general rules denoted by G hashtag. And then there's the game specific rules which are denoted by GS hashtag. Violation of any of these rules will lead to warnings or even penalties and yellow or red cards. And your robot may be disabled as well, or you may be disqualified from the entire competition. And these rules apply to every single match, on field and off field both. Now, moving on to 4.5.1 safety rules. The first rule states that your robot should not damage the playfield in any way. So, if the robot is damaging the playfield, like for example, taking off the mats or breaking the field walls, then there would be a re-inspection of the robot by the referees, and the team may be given a yellow card, and the robot will be disabled for the remainder of the match. And damage that requires a lot of repair from first side, that would be given a red card, that team. Moving on to the second rule, the robot parts cannot extend outside the playing field. That means you cannot extend parts or move any gripper or whatever mechanism you have outside the field walls. That would result in a yellow card and the robot will be disabled immediately. And this would just be an exception under a few game specific rules, which I'll be covering later. Now, moving on to rule 3, safety gear. All members of the drive team are expected to wear the ANSI certified glasses on the competition day around the field. And you're expected to wear shoes which are covered from the toes and heels as well, for safety reasons. And if at all this rule is violated, there would be 30 seconds given to rectify it immediately. Otherwise, warnings will be given, and then subsequent violations would lead to a minor penalty, and the minor penalty would result in 10 points awarded to the opposite alliance. So get these ready from wherever you stay, because it would be difficult to arrange these in 30 seconds. Moving on to rule 4, competition area safety. Now this rule is about the local program delivery partner. So it's up to them about this rule, and it's specific from different regions and different regional championships. So you may contact your delivery program partner to learn more about Rule 4 in safety. Moving on to some general game rules. Now, as Kush said, starting on with 1, uh, at the conclusion of the autonomous period, the robots would still not be touched by the driver team, and 8 seconds would be given to transition from the autonomous period to the driver control period. And in the last 4 seconds, there would be a
3, 2, 1.
go countdown where the driver can where the driver control period will begin, and the drivers can start or change the op mode on the driver station. Now moving on to rule 2, scores will be tracked by the field personnel throughout the autonomous and driver control periods, and the final score will be tallied as soon as possible at the end of the match. So if you accidentally descore a pixel, then it would not be counted, because all the pixels that will be remaining either in the backstage or the backdrop would be considered final, and any ones that drop would not. And those would not be recounted as well, and you cannot argue with the referees because they have the final say. Rule number 3 is forcing an opponent to break a rule. The actions of one alliance cannot cause the opposing alliance to break a rule, and the opposite alliance that was forced to break the rule will not incur any penalties. But it would not be good for the alliance that forced them to break the rule, because that would not come under gracious professionalism, which first promotes in every single competition. So I would recommend you to not uh, force your opponent alliance to break any rules. Now, scoring elements that are controlled or possessed by a robot will be considered a part of the robot, unless a game specific rule adds an exception to it. Now, there's many questions like, what if I put the pixel in the backstage and then put it on the backdrop? In that case, rule number 5 states that only the highest eligible one will be considered. So the 5 points will be awarded for keeping the pixel on the backdrop, and the backstage would not be considered. Now, rule number 6 is scoring elements in contact with robots, and elements that are in the scoring area and that are controlled by a robot. That means the robot has not left them still. It's still a part of the robot. Those would not be counted as points, and they would still have a zero value until the robot stops controlling or releases the game element, like a pixel. And then if a referee disables a robot, according to Rule 7, it cannot score points for the remainder of the match. Uh, it does not incur penalties as well, so it's just disabled. So your alliance will just have one robot competing against two. So try to avoid a disabled robot, because it becomes hard for your other alliance partner as well. Now, there's playing field tolerances in Rule 8, where the playing field has tolerances. That means you can expect the game elements like trusses, riggings to be more or less 1 inch. That way, you can have an approx calculation, and you don't need to build your robot fit to fit. But still, it is recommended to not be dependent on this rule, because it depends on the regional championship delivery partner. According to them, the tolerances will be provided. So try to build it as exact and precise as possible. Now, moving on to rule number 9, match replay. Matches are replayed, like a restart, at the discretion of the head referee only, and this would only be caused due to a failure of a part not supplied by any of the team. So if there's any issue from first side, that way the match would be replayed if it's not fair, or if there are many Wi-Fi hindrances as well. Now, robot behavior that is unexpected from the part of any other team competing on the playfield would not result in a replay, because that is the team's fault. That would be considered as the team's fault, and that would not be eligible for a replay. Rule number 10 states that robot actions that violate a rule may be ruled at the referee's discretion, be inconsequential or inadvertent, and will not be penalized. This just means that the referees have the final say in what would be penalized and what would not be penalized. So you can avoid arguing with the referees that this should have been a penalty and all of that, because the referees have thought of something nicely, and they're trying to provide the most fair platform for the field. Now there's Rule 11, illegal match communication. This just states that some forms of communication on the match day, either on field or off field, are not allowed. For example, cell phones, two-way radios, also called walkie-talkies, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and a lot more. Now, drive team members, after the alliance has been called to the playing field, cannot communicate through these methods. This would result in a minor penalty, and any other following instances where the same rule is broken, um, it would still result in many penalties for the next match. The driver station is exempt from this rule, though, because there could be uses for this electronic communications in testing purposes of the robot. So you can use these kind of communication methods on the driver station. Now, playing field access is rule number 12. where team members cannot enter the playing field for any reason other than to place the robot or to take the robot back. So even when you're competing against another alliance, you cannot enter the play field. You have to stay in your drive team section, which was shown in the illustration. And it could result in a minor penalty during just match setup or the end of the match, or a major penalty that can delay the start of the match as well. And violations of this rule outside of a normal match play, for example, if it's not your match and you still enter the play field, that would give you a yellow card. And if you feel that if the setup is not done correctly, don't enter the play field. Instead, notify the field personnel or the first technical advisor. Rule 13 is pre-match robot placement. Kush covered a little part of this at the start, but I'll still cover it up in detail. During the qualification matches, there's a default order, usually, where blue sets up first and then red sets up. But if red chooses to set up first, they can directly place their robot first, or together with blue. They don't need to inform the referees at all because it's considered as waiving the rights to uh, set up the playing field second. And during the elimination matches, it's according to the seeded order, where the third and fourth seeded alliance robots are set up first. But same rule applies here, where if the third and fourth alliance uh, robots want to set up first or second, they can directly place their robot and the right would be waived off. They don't need to inform the referee. Now, during elimination matches, three team alliances may only play two robots that are intended to compete in that match. So, this depends upon your program delivery partner. Over here in our country, India, we just have two members in one alliance. So this rule doesn't affect us much because both the alliance members will compete in the field. And teams that unnecessarily delay the beginning of a match will get a minor penalty, and after every offense, that may escalate to a major penalty. And all of that depends on the head referee. Even late arrival to the playing field is considered as a delay to the match. So as soon as you're called, rush to the playing field as soon as you can. Now, G14 states that before the start of a match, every robot uh, must fit within the sizing 18 by 18 by 18 inches, and flexible materials or soft materials that can be compressed can extend up to a quarter of an inch beyond the 18-inch limit. But try to avoid this because there may be issues in inspection as well. And if a violation is identified, for example, your robot is extending out of 18 centimeters, then you must fix it within 30 seconds, or uh, the offending robot will be removed from the playing field. And you would still get ranking and tiebreaker points, but then your match would be wasted. So I would recommend you to be aware of the sizing of your robot before the sizing tool and inspection is done. Moving on to rule 15, we have robot setup alignment, where teams can align their robots during match setup uh, if they do so with legal components that are a part of the robot and can be reset within the 18-inch cube starting volume constraint. This means that the robot can be set up in any way you like, except that it cannot extend out of 18 inches, and it should fit in when reset. And the alignment devices that extend out of the 18-inch constraint will not be powered, so that would just not be used at all in the match. Now, moving on to rule 16, we have alliance and human player stations. During a match, the drive team must remain in their alliance station no matter what. They can sit and kneel or stand, but they cannot sleep in the alliance station because that is considered to change the viewing angle or to gain an advantageous viewing angle in that case. And the opposite drive team members cannot distract or interfere with each other on the opposing alliance teams. So violations would immediately result in a major penalty and a possible yellow card on the discretion of the head referee. Now, if you leave the driver's station, then you would first get a minor penalty, and then you would, uh, if you leave it for safety reasons, for example, there's any issue that has occurred on the play field, that would not result in a penalty. So if you think that it's compromising your safety, then it's fine to leave the driver's station or the human player station because you would not be penalized for that. Now, rule number 17 is the post-match removal of robots, where robots must be designed to be, easily remove the pixels and other game elements from itself. And robots should also be able to it can also be removed easily from the playing field without delay or damage to the playing field. And if this rule is violated, a minor penalty will be issued. And this rule is intended to have timely removal of robots to prevent delays and prevent damage to the playing field if the robot is deemed dangerous. Now G18, which is starting gameplay early. Robots that begin the match before the match starts, before the autonomous period starts, will instantly be given a minor penalty. And referees have the option of issuing a major penalty as well, depending upon the severity of how early they've started. And G19 is the late start of the autonomous period. A drive team that starts the robots off mode late will receive a minor penalty, and any delay in robot movement must be done by its programming. Referees can also have the option of issuing a major penalty, like always, uh, if the late start results in a competitive advantage for the offending alliance. This usually would not happen, but still avoid it at all costs. Now, moving on to G20, which is robot actions at the end of the period, where robots must park at the end of the autonomous and driver control period. And parked as in it should either be suspended or in the backstage, where if it's not, you would get a minor penalty and the robot's actions would not be counted in the alliance's score. Drive teams should make their best effort to stop immediately as soon as the game end sound begins, and even points scored afterwards will not be considered as well. So there's no point in playing on after the sound plays. Just leave your gamepad and press the stop button on the driver station. Now, scoring achievements that were started before the end of the period, as in as soon as the bell or the sound rang, before that the score was completed, that would be counted, but after the sound, it would not be counted. And moving on to G21, which is robot control during autonomous period, where drive teams cannot control the robot. It should solely be controlled by sensors, cameras, or pre-programmed instructions. The first violation would result in a warning, and then it would escalate to a minor penalty, and then a yellow card, and so on. G22 is quite similar. Now we can move on to G23, where the drive team coach cannot control the driver station or the gamepad. This would result in a major penalty because the first tech challenge is intended for students to compete, and the coaches are strictly not allowed to control the robot at all. Now, G24 is robots deliberately detaching parts where you cannot have a movable part or a detachable part inside a robot. For example, a robot inside of a robot, and it should always be attached to the robot and be a part of it, because if it's detached, it would be counted as a separate robot, and having two robots from one team would be a major penalty. I mean, a minor penalty. And if the gameplay is affected or the field is damaged, then that would result in a major penalty or even a yellow card. G25 is robots grasping game elements, where grasping is like holding, and robots cannot attach to any game element. For example, rigging, unless allowed by a game specific rule, where the suspending on the rigging is allowed by the game specific rule. So that would not result in a penalty. However, apart from that, if you don't do it in the end game, then it would result in a major penalty after a warning. Moving on to G26, where there's destruction, damage, and tipping. Robots that are considered as destructive or damaging or entangling other robots and game elements that cause damage to either of the elements or the robots would be given a penalty. And any entanglement that impair the functions of the opposite alliance's robot, either team, would result in a major penalty or even a yellow card depending on the referee. G27 is removing game elements from the playing field, where robots cannot remove the game elements like pixels from the playing field unless allowed, like the backstage rule in the game specific rules, which I'll be covering right now in some time. And game elements that by mistake fall outside will be returned, and a warning will be given as well. And moving on to G28, where you cannot pin, trap, or block your opponent robots. And pinning, trapping, or blocking is just limiting the motion of the robot, of the opposite robot, and every 5 seconds a minor penalty will be incurred. And the robot is outside the range of the violation, at least 1.5 tiles or 3 feet away from the pinned robot. During the autonomous period, robots will not incur this penalty unless it is a part of your deliberate strategy. So, uh, the autonomous period, if this happens according to the control of the camera, then it would not be penalized. But if it's pre-programmed and intended to block the robots, then a penalty would be assessed. Now there's G29, where illegal usage of game elements, where robots cannot deliberately use game elements to increase or decrease the difficulty of scoring or any activity for either the alliance themselves or the opposite alliance. A major penalty would be assessed for this rule, and continued violations of this rule would be escalated to a yellow card by the head referee. The last general rule, G30, is egregious behavior, which is just rude or unprofessional behavior in terms of the first tech challenge. It includes repeated violation of rules, uncivil behavior, and unprofessional language to the volunteers, drive team, event attendees, or even the referees. The offending team would be given a major penalty, a red or yellow card, and subsequent violations of this rule, which is very strictly enforced by the first tech challenge, would result in the team getting disqualified from the competition itself. So be professional over there on the competition day. Avoid getting into fights or talking impolitely with others, because this would be considered as egregious behavior. Now we move on to the game specific rules 4.5.3, where the first rule states that there are some exceptions that game specific rules can make to the general rules. These are 9 rules listed down here, which are exceptions. You can check these out. Now, moving on to rule 2 is drive teams are supposed to touch, are not supposed to touch or interact with the robots once the field personnel have begun the randomization process for the autonomous period. If this occurs, a minor penalty would be awarded to the alliance, to the offending alliance. Now, the offending alliance who committed this offense would not be eligible to earn the randomization task that is involving the spike marks. They would not be awarded the points even though they complete the task. Now, there's rule number 3 where autonomous interference and a major penalty is assessed, wherein if you enter the half of the other alliance's field, that a major penalty would be assessed. So A, B, C constitute the blue side of the field, and D, E, F constitute the red side of the uh, playing field. So the tabs or the line joining C and D are considered neutral. So even if your wheel is on that line, a penalty would not be incurred. However, if it is a part of tile A, B, and C, then be prepared for a major penalty. So be sure to code your autonomous period in such a way that it's limited to just half of the field, depending on which alliance you are in. Now, moving on to the fourth rule, descoring. And you cannot descore your opponent's opposing alliance's pixels from the backdrop. A minor penalty would be assessed for every pixel that is descored. So that's like giving them double the points for what they've scored, because every point you get, every pixel you score on the backdrop is 5 points, and every minor alliance is 10 points. So avoid this rule at all costs. It can cost you an entire match. Now, rule number 5 is where there's limits to how many game elements the robot can possess at a time. The robot can only possess 2 pixels at a time and 1 drone. Uh, Controlling more than these would result in a minor penalty for every extra game element control. And scoring a pixel while in control of more than 2 elements would result in a minor penalty as well. And knocking over a stack of unscored pixels is allowed. These are some exceptions. And inconsequential or non-deliberate movement of a preset stack of unscored pixels is allowed. However, moving the entire stack off the tape is not allowed and would be resulting in a warning or a penalty. You can plow through or drive through any number of game elements you want, just not control them. Pixels in the backstage are directly supported by the playing field floor that is exempt to the controlling or possession limit. And the intent of this rule is to prevent false penalties in case a robot is controlling in the backstage. Now, pixels on the backdrop are exempt from the control or possession limit because they're already scored, and unless they're descored, they're not a part of the robot. Moving on to rule 6 is truss constraints, where robots can only grab either one of the rigging of their corresponding alliance specific trusses, that is ABC and DEF tiles, which I mentioned about earlier, and contact with the other parts of the truss. The truss is triangular in shape with a little rigging at the top. That is allowed for the stabilization of the robot in the endgame while suspended. The intent of the rigging, though, will support connecting the two triangles is to be the primary support for the robot, and that would result in 20 points for the hanging. And robots cannot grasp or suspend from any part of the truss structure except the rigging. Violation would not give you 20 points, but it would result in a minor penalty for the offending alliance. There's a limit of just one supporting robot per rigging, and there's 4 riggings, and additional robots would not be counted, and that would result in a major penalty. A robot cannot impede or obstruct an opposite alliance to hang on the rigging. Otherwise, this would come under the block, pin, or trap rule, and this would also result in a major penalty. So avoid stopping a robot from hanging at the end game. A robot should not all come in contact with the suspended robots as well. This would also result in a minor penalty for coming in contact with a suspended robot, because this rule is intended for the safety of the suspended robot. During the end game, the height restricted paths, that is, except the stage door, the other two sides would not be considered as a way of travel, and just the stage door would be allowed to travel from the front and the back of the playfield. Then we have rule number 7, which is stage door constraints. These stage door constraints apply to only both the operational and disabled robots. Robots may not grasp the stage door. This would be a major penalty because the stage door is one of the main methods of transport, especially in the end game. Preventing the stage door from opening normally, that is similar to grasping, but preventing its motion upwards, would result in a major penalty. And then disrupting the transit of an opposite alliance from the stage door, as in blocking them, is not allowed as per the block, pin, or trap rule. And robots passing through the stage door from the audience side uh, would have a priority, where robots traveling from the back to the audience side must have a free path of travel. The stage door is wide enough to let two robots travel or pass through at the same time without any collisions. Robots that allow a free path of travel for both their alliance partners and the opposite alliance would be less likely to incur transit constraint penalties. So try to give priority to the faster robots to travel through the stage door first. Now moving on to rule 8. A robot cannot obstruct an opposite alliance from reaching their backstage or the backdrop. Each violation of this rule would land you a minor penalty. And once a referee determines this rule to be violated, a major penalty can be applied as well. And a minor penalty would also be added every 5 seconds until the robot moves 1.5 tiles or 3 feet away from the violation zone. A disabled robot in the opposite alliance's backstage will still get penalties, and it is an exception to rule G07, which I covered earlier about disabled robots. And the robots located in the tile rows 1, 2, and 3 cannot score into the backstage or a backdrop, and every violation would be assessed as a minor penalty. Now, rule 9 is some wing constraints, where a robot cannot obstruct the opposing alliance's robot that is in their own alliance's wing. Every violation of this rule would result in an immediate minor penalty. And the same rule applies here. A minor penalty would be added every 5 seconds until the robot does not move 1.5 tiles away or 3 feet away from the affected robot. And a disabled robot in the wing is not considered as a safety hazard. Therefore, the scoring elements may be continued to be placed by the human players. However, a disabled robot in the opposing alliance's wing will still be eligible for penalties and including yellow cards as well. This is another exception to the disabled robots rule general 07, and there can only be a maximum of 6 pixels in the wing at one time. A minor penalty would be assessed for every additional pixel beyond the 6 pixel limit. Pixels in the possession of the robot, that is, if the pixels are being controlled by the robot, would not count in this limit. GS 10, where pixel constraints. Pixels may not be propelled or shot from a far place, where each violation of this rule would result in a minor penalty. Now, 11 is drone constraints, where there are some limitations on the drone, where the drones are to be preloaded onto the robots during the pre-match setup, and you cannot preload it after the autonomous period or after the match is done. And the drone that is being used in the robot should be created by the team itself, and it should not be given by any other opposite team. And a major penalty would be assessed if the referees find out that the drone used was not of the team and in fact was from another team. Now there's drones launched before the end game. That is, before the end game starts, you launch your drone. That would not be considered to score and would have a zero score value. And the drones can be launched from suspended drones, except that they should pass over the rigging or the top pole of the stage door to be eligible to score points. The drone must be in a legal configuration to score points. Altering a drone after the inspection during match play is not in the spirit of this rule and would not be considered as a scored drone. That effectively means the value would be zero. Now, drone interference is where a robot cannot affect the flight of the opposing alliance's drone, and any affected drone or a robot would be awarded Zone 1 points, which is free 30 points. And contact between two or more drones in a flight, that means if two drones clash, that would not be penalized even in air or in the landing zone. Drive teams cannot directly or indirectly affect the flight of a drone. Affecting an opposite alliance's drone will result in that drone getting landing 1 zone points, as I mentioned earlier, 30 points. But affecting your own team drone's flight results would not result in points. So if your own alliance member affects your flight, then that would not result in any points. And a drone that contacts field personnel in a landing zone would still be awarded landing zone 1 point, no matter where the robot lands. Even if it lands in zone 3, it will still be awarded zone 1 points if it comes in contact with one of the field personnel. And a drone that contacts the field personnel outside the landing zone, that is not in the taped regions of zone 1, 2, and 3, would not be given any points regardless of where it lands. Now there's Rule 12 in game specific rules, where there are some restrictions on the human player, where every violation of these 10 rules would result in a minor penalty. The drones in the pixels in the pixel storage area should not be handled until the match is begun. And you can preload some elements, but be sure about the limits, as I mentioned earlier. Now, drones and pixels can be placed or dropped only inside the wing and during the driver control period. They can be in any orientation you like and can be in contact with other drones or pixels in the wing. And there can only be a maximum of 2 pixels or one drone in the wing at a time. And once a pixel or a drone has been placed, the human player cannot pick it up or change its orientation again. Once it's placed, it's there. You cannot take it back. Now, human players cannot propel or throw drones out of the wing. Now, human players should take care when releasing scoring elements into the wing. The final resting place of the pixel or drone is the responsibility of the human player. Even if it bounces off or then goes inside the playing field, it would still be a minor penalty because that is considered as the responsibility of the human player. Now, the human player can enter the area between the human player station and the adjacent playing field wall while placing a pixel or drone, provided that it is done safely and does not cause damage to the playing field. The human player cannot use any tools or devices to change a pixel or drone that is already placed in the wing. So there can be exceptions made for human players with disabilities, uh, and that depends on the tournament director. And for safety reasons, this is a quite straightforward rule where the human player cannot break the vertical playing field wall because that would be considered as damage to the playing field. And a disabled robot in the alliance's wing is not considered a safety hazard. Therefore, the drones and pixels can be continued to be placed without any fear. Now, the robot cannot enter the wing while a human player is in the wing. The intent of this rule is to prevent the human and robot contact and enhance the safety of the human players. Now, the last game specific rule is the truss or stage door safety, where the drive teams can not step or jump over any section of the truss or the stage door. And there was also a rule earlier that you cannot enter the playing field unless to pick up or to place your robot. This would result in a warning, and there would also be the violations of the other rule as well over here. And subsequent violations at the competition would result in a yellow. So this was all for all of these rules, game specific ones. You can still go through them. The game manual part 2 is linked in the description. We'll link 4.6, the scoring summary, always you can score points, and 4.7, a summary of all the rules in the description. Do check those out, and that's all for this video.